I was 29 years old when I opened my mother's bedroom door and found something that changed everything I ever believed about her, about our family, and about myself. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, completely frozen, holding a small cardboard box that felt heavier than anything I had ever carried in my life. This is that story, and I have never told it to anyone until now. Before I get into this, if you've ever had that quiet feeling in your gut that your family was keeping something from you, that there was a door somewhere that was never supposed to be opened, subscribe right now, because this channel exists for people who are brave enough to face the truth. Stay with me until the very end of this story, because the last part, the part I almost didn't include, that's the part that will stay with you the longest. I grew up believing my life was simple. Not perfect, nobody's is, but simple in the way that felt safe. A small house on a quiet street, a mother who worked double shifts at the hospital and still somehow had dinner on the table by 7. A childhood that was tight on money but never tight on love. My father left when I was 4. I don't say that with anger anymore. I used to, but now I just say it as a fact, the way you'd say it rained on a Tuesday. He left, and my mother stayed, and that was the whole story as far as I knew it. She was a nurse, had been one since before I was born, and if you've ever known a nurse, truly known one, you know that it's not just a job, it's a personality. It's the way they stay calm when everything around them is falling apart. It's the way they notice things other people miss. It's the way they carry pain quietly without ever showing you how much it weighs. That was my mother, quiet strength. That was the only version of her I had ever known. She didn't talk much about her past, about her own childhood, her own parents, the years before I existed. Whenever I asked, she'd smile this small, tired smile and say something like, "There's nothing interesting back there, baby. What matters is right here." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother. She was the most honest person I knew, or at least that's what I thought. Growing up, there were little things I never questioned. Her bedroom door was always locked when she wasn't home. She had a drawer in the kitchen that nobody was allowed to go through. Not in a strict, scary way, just in the way that some things in a house become unspoken rules. You don't touch the thermostat, you don't open that drawer, you don't ask about before. I never thought those things meant anything. I thought every family had their small, closed-off corners. I thought that was just normal. I was wrong. I was living about 2 hours away at the time, working in logistics management for a mid-sized shipping company. Nothing glamorous, long hours, decent pay, the kind of job that keeps the lights on and leaves you too tired to ask big questions about life. I came home to visit my mother on a weekend in late October, the kind of October where the leaves are almost gone and the air smells like cold earth and firewood. I remember it clearly because something about that weekend felt off from the moment I walked through the door. My mother hugged me the way she always did, tight, both arms, the kind of hug that tells you you've been missed. But when she pulled back, her eyes were somewhere else. Just for a second, just long enough for me to notice. I told myself I was imagining it. We had dinner, we watched some television. She asked about work, about my apartment, about whether I was eating properly, the usual mother checklist. But she kept her phone face down on the table the entire evening, and twice I saw her glance at it with an expression I couldn't quite name. Not guilt exactly, more like dread. That night, I lay awake in my old bedroom, listening to the house settle around me, and I heard something I hadn't heard since I was a child. My mother, behind her closed door, crying, softly. The kind of crying someone does when they're trying very hard not to be heard. I almost knocked. I almost got up, walked down the hallway, and asked her what was wrong. But I didn't. I told myself it was none of my business. I told myself she was tired, maybe overwhelmed, maybe just having one of those nights that everyone has. I pulled the covers up and closed my eyes and convinced myself that everything was fine. That was the last time everything felt fine. The next morning, my mother left for an early shift before I even woke up. I came downstairs around 8, still half asleep, and started making tea. The house was quiet in that particular way it gets in the morning. Not peaceful quiet, but empty quiet, the kind that makes you notice everything. And that's when I saw it. Her bedroom door, slightly open, not wide open, just a few inches, the way a door looks when someone left in a hurry and didn't pull it all the way shut. That door had been locked my entire childhood. Every time I'd ever seen it, it was closed completely. But that morning, it was open, just barely, like an invitation I wasn't sure I was supposed to accept. I stood in the hallway for a long time, longer than I'd like to admit. My tea was getting cold. The rational part of my brain told me to walk away, go sit on the couch, scroll through my phone like a normal person. But there was something else, some pull that I can't fully explain that moved my hand to that door and pushed it open slowly. Her room was tidy. That was the first thing I noticed. Everything exactly where it should be. The bed made with hospital corners, her small lamp on the nightstand, a glass of water, a book. Normal, completely normal. I almost turned around, but then I saw it, the edge of something sticking out from under the bed. A cardboard box, small, old, the kind that had been handled so many times the corners had gone soft. Not hidden, more like moved aside in a hurry, not pushed back all the way. I crouched down and pulled it out, and I sat on the floor of my mother's bedroom with that box in my lap, and I opened it. Inside the box there were letters, a thick bundle of them, tied with a piece of string that had gone brittle with age. Beneath those, a handful of photographs, and beneath the photographs, folded once and worn at the creases like it had been opened and refolded 100 times, a birth certificate. I looked at the photographs first. They were old, the kind printed on glossy paper with a white border, the colors slightly faded the way photos from decades ago always fade. There was a woman in several of them who I recognized, my mother, but young, maybe 20, 21, smiling in a way I had never seen her smile, completely open, unguarded, like she hadn't yet learned that the world sometimes takes things from you without warning. And in several of the photos, she was holding a baby. I stared at those photos for what felt like a very long time. My mother had never mentioned another child, never once. I was her son, her only child. That was the story. That had always been the story. Then I unfolded the birth certificate. The mother listed was her name, her date of birth, everything matching. But the child's name, I didn't recognize it. A name I had never heard her say, not once in my entire life. And the date of birth was listed nearly 3 years before my own. And the father's name, that was someone I had never heard of either. Not the man who eventually became my father and then left, someone else entirely. My hands were shaking. I sat there on that cold floor, and I could feel my entire understanding of my own history shifting beneath me, like ground that wasn't as solid as I'd always believed. I untied the letters next. They were written in my mother's handwriting, younger, slightly looser, but unmistakably hers. But she hadn't written them to me. She had written them to someone else, and they were never sent. I know it wasn't right to read them. I want to be honest about that. But I also couldn't stop. I read every single one. The story that came out of those pages was one I had never imagined. When my mother was 19, she had fallen in love, deeply, completely, the way young people fall in love when they don't yet know how badly love can go wrong. The man she loved was older than her by several years, from a different background, and her family, her parents, her brothers, had disapproved from the beginning, not quietly, loudly, aggressively, with ultimatums. When she became pregnant, the disapproval turned into something worse. Her family told her she had two choices: end the relationship completely, give the baby up for adoption, and return home, or lose her family entirely. No support, no contact, no safety net. She was 19 years old, with no money, no job, and nowhere to go. She felt she had no real choice at all. She gave the baby up. And then, and this is the part that broke something in me, she was told by the adoption agency, through her own parents who had handled everything, that the child had not survived infancy, that there had been complications, that it was over. She had spent decades believing her firstborn child was dead. The letters were her grief, written over years, written to a child she thought she had lost forever, trying to explain what happened, trying to ask for forgiveness from someone she believed would never be able to read them. Some of them were only a few lines long. Some of them went on for pages. All of them were devastating. I sat on that floor and I read the grief of a woman I thought I completely knew, and I realized for the first time in my life that I had only ever known one chapter of her. After I had read through most of the letters, I went back to the bottom of the box, more carefully this time, and that's when I found it. A letter that was different from the others, newer paper, fresher ink. The handwriting wasn't my mother's. The date at the top was 3 weeks earlier. The letter was written by someone introducing themselves, calmly, carefully, the way a person writes when they've been rehearsing what to say for a very long time. They explained that they had been searching for years, that they had found records, that they had found her, and that they weren't writing out of anger. They were writing because they simply needed to know where they came from. The child my mother had been told was dead was not dead. They were alive, fully grown, and they had tracked her down. I put the letter down and I just breathed for a minute, because everything I had been processing up until that point, the birth certificate, the photographs, the old letters, all of it had been history, painful, buried history. But this letter made it present, real, happening right now in the same world I was sitting in. My mother had been secretly meeting with this person, the hidden phone calls, the distracted evenings, the crying behind a closed door. It all made sense now. She wasn't hiding a shameful past. She was trying to figure out how to survive the return of the most painful thing she had ever lost. And she had been carrying all of it completely alone because she didn't know how to tell me that I had a sibling I had never known existed, a sibling who had grown up somewhere else with someone else's family, not knowing our mother either. I don't know exactly what I felt in that moment. I've tried to find the right word for it many times since then. The closest I can get is this. It felt like the floor of my memory had opened up and I was falling through it into a version of my own life that I had never been shown. I put everything back in the box exactly as I found it. I slid it under the bed. I walked back to the kitchen, poured my cold tea down the sink, and made a fresh cup. And then I sat at the kitchen table and I waited. My mother came home at 3 in the afternoon. I heard her key in the lock, heard her set her bag down in the hallway, heard the small sounds she always made coming home, the exhale, the kick-off of her shoes. Ordinary sounds, the sounds of a woman coming back to a house that she thought was still safe. She walked into the kitchen and stopped. I was sitting at the table with the box in front of me. I hadn't planned it to do it that way, but something in me needed her to see it immediately, needed us to be past the pretending before a single word was spoken. The silence between us lasted a long time. She didn't move, she didn't speak, she just looked at the box. And then she looked at me, and her face did something I had never seen it do before. It completely gave way. Every careful thing she had ever held in place just collapsed. She sat down across from me, and she covered her mouth with both hands. I didn't yell. I want you to know that. I had thought, walking through all of this alone for hours, that maybe I'd be angry. But sitting across from her, seeing her face in that moment, I wasn't angry at all. I was just deeply, quietly sad. For her. For what she had carried. For all the years that weight had been sitting inside her while she made my lunches and worked her double shifts and told me everything was fine. I asked her only one question. Why didn't you tell me? And she broke apart completely. She told me everything, not in the composed, organized way the letters had laid it out, but in the way real people tell the truth when they can no longer hold it back. Fragmented, tearful, circling back, repeating certain parts. She told me about the man she had loved, about her family's ultimatum, about the choice that was never really a choice. She told me what they had told her about the baby and the way she had believed it for so many years because she had been given no reason not to. And she told me about the letter that had arrived 3 weeks ago, about the phone call she had gathered the courage to make, about meeting this person for the first time at a small cafe and sitting across from someone who had her eyes and not knowing whether to feel joy or guilt or relief or grief, feeling all of them at once, all tangled together, impossible to separate. She hadn't told me, she said, because she didn't know how, because every time she tried to find the words, she became terrified of what I would think of her. She had spent so long being my strong, steady, reliable mother that she didn't know how to let me see the girl she had been before, the 19-year-old who had been put in an impossible position and made a decision she never stopped paying for. I got up from my chair and I walked around the table and I held her, like she had held me when I was small, and we stayed like that for a long time without saying anything at all. 2 weeks later, I met my sibling for the first time. We chose a neutral place, a quiet cafe, mid-morning on a weekday when it wouldn't be crowded. My mother came with me. I remember the drive there, the two of us not talking much, the radio on low, the particular tension of going somewhere that feels enormous but looks completely ordinary from the outside. They were already there when we arrived, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, turned slightly toward the door like they'd been watching for us. And when I walked in and our eyes met across that room, I felt something that I genuinely don't have perfect words for. Recognition is the closest I can get, not of a face I knew, but of something underneath the face, something that exists below the surface of the people who share your blood, whether they grew up with you or not. We shook hands first, which made both of us almost laugh because it felt absurd, shaking hands with someone who carries the same story in their DNA that you do. Then we sat down and we talked. For almost 4 hours we talked. They had grown up well, a good family, a full life, a career in architecture. They had always known they were adopted. Their adoptive parents had been honest from the beginning. But knowing and understanding are different things. They had started searching in their late 20s, piece by piece, record by record, until a name finally connected to an address, and an address connected to a letter. They weren't angry at my mother, I want to make that clear. They had thought about this for years, about what they would feel when they finally found her, and what they had arrived at was not anger, it was curiosity. It was the simple human need to look at someone and say, so this is where I came from. This is the beginning of my story. My mother sat between us, and at one point she reached out and took one of each of our hands, and I looked at her face in that moment, this woman who had carried so much for so long alone, and she looked lighter. That's the only word for it. like something that had been pressing down on her for 30 years had finally been set on the table between the three of us, where it could be looked at, where it could be shared, where it no longer had to be carried alone. We didn't become an instant family. I want to be honest about that too, because life doesn't work the way movies do. There were more meetings, more conversations, more careful steps. There were moments of awkwardness and moments of an unexpected warmth and moments that were hard to categorize. But something real was being built, slowly, without a blueprint, the way real things are built. I've thought about this story a lot in the years since it happened, about what it means, about what it taught me. The thing that strikes me most is not the secret itself, it's why my mother kept it. She didn't keep it out of selfishness, she didn't keep it to protect herself, she kept it because she had learned very early in life that the truth can cost you everything. Her family had taught her that, the world she grew up in had taught her that, and so she had buried the most painful chapter of her life so deep that she could almost believe on most days that it belonged to someone else. But secrets don't stay buried. That's the thing nobody tells you when you're deciding to keep one. They don't stay buried. They live inside you, quietly, and they change the way you breathe, and the way you sleep, and the way you look at your phone when it rings. They come out in small ways, a locked door, a hidden drawer, eyes that go somewhere else in the middle of an ordinary dinner. The truth always finds a way to take up space, even when you've given it no room at all. I also think about karma. I think about the people who told my mother her baby had not survived, her own parents who had chosen their pride over their daughter's grief, who had lied to her in the most cruel way possible and called it mercy. I think about what those years must have cost them, how a lie like that sits inside a person, how you carry something like that forward. They are both gone now. They died carrying what they did, and I have to believe somewhere in the quiet logic of how life works that there is a weight to what you do to people you were supposed to protect. And then I think about the moment in that cafe, 3 people at a table, a mother and 2 children who were never supposed to find each other, a circle that the world had broken 30 years earlier, mending itself one careful conversation at a time. If that's not something, if that's not the universe showing you that what gets broken can come back together, then I don't know what is. My mother is older now. She is still a nurse, though she works fewer hours. She still makes dinner by 7 when I visit, and she is no longer alone with her story. That, more than anything, is what I'm grateful for. Not the discovery itself, but what came after. The lightness I saw in her face that day in the cafe, the way she laughs now, a little more freely, a little more fully, like someone who has finally set down a bag they've been carrying for far too long. I opened a door I wasn't supposed to open, and what I found behind it wasn't darkness. Not really. It was a person, my mother, fully and completely, a woman who had loved and lost and survived and kept going, carrying her grief quietly for decades, never asking anyone to help her hold it. The door was never supposed to stay closed. It was just waiting for the right moment to open. If this story reached you, if it made you think about the people in your life and the things they might be carrying that you've never thought to ask about, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most important thing we can do for the people we love is simply to open the door. Drop a comment below and tell me, has someone in your family ever carried a secret that changed the way you saw them? I read every single comment, every one, and I'll see you in the next story.